everybody. Greetings from the Haystack Deck. It's been a long winter, so I thought I'd come outside and record for you a little bit of information about your syllabus for the term. We'll see how well this actually works out. I'm looking at the syllabus online, and you could also open up your syllabus or make a copy of it to have a look at here. Old Testament 500, Old Testament Intro is what we're talking about here. So if you're not in that class, you're probably in the wrong place right now. I am your professor, and you will see my phone numbers listed there. That's a cell phone, so you can call it anytime while I'm in the country. I'll have some time in August while I won't be in the country, and you probably won't want to use it then. The best way to get me is bethhayes@fuller.edu. I look at that every single day, several times, and usually try to get back to people the same day that I get your emails. So by phone, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Saturday. That's Pacific time. So keep that in mind just in case you're living on the other coast or in some place that's pretty far away like Europe. Let's see, emails within 24 hours. On the weekends, sometimes maybe not quite so quickly, or again, if I'm traveling and can't find an internet, that might have something to do with it. But I will let you know before those days come up, and it usually is still 24 hours. Okay. If you have an emergency, go ahead and email with an urgent in the subject line, and I'll get to that one right away. Okay. So what we're doing here is a basic introduction to the literature of the Old Testament in its different contexts. So we're going to look a lot at things like literary context, historical context, and we will supply our theological discussion from what we're reading and that sort of thing as we go along. So we're going to look at what does the Old Testament have to say about God, which is basically the definition of what theology is, talking about God. How does the Old Testament talk about God, and how does that then come into our New Testament practice? Because there's, of course, the death and resurrection of Christ. Something happens between the testaments that we need to account for as well before making application today. The books we cover are something from every genre of the Old Testament, but not everything in every genre. So we have Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, 2 Samuel, Job, Psalms, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Daniel. And from there, you'll be able to have tools to reach out and go to the, kind of go laterally to some of the other books that we may not cover. We'll cover historical narrative, law, prophecy, and writings, those kinds of things. And so you'll be able to go out into the other genres and work with them. Okay, so learning outcomes are listed here. We want you to have a basic grasp of the contents of the scripture and the history and geography of Israel itself. The next point 2, we want you to be able to use interpretive approaches to explore the literary features of the Old Testament and the historical and cultural context, and be able then to put those two things together to make a good interpretation. We want you to be able to assess what hermeneutical issues arise from the diverse contexts of our reading population today. So typically, even though we may be sitting in the same room at one point, we're not exactly from the same context. We're not working within the same context. So we need to be very aware of what's going on for contemporary readers today. We would like you to be able to see the Old Testament as scripture and relate it to Christian theology, to mission, and to discipleship. Sometimes that's tricky, and we'll get into some discussions about that, I'm sure. Sometimes it's a little more straightforward, as my Women in the Old Testament students are demonstrating to me as I read essays right now, that they've really picked up on some things that are quite pertinent to what goes on in the world today. So interpreting and applying Old Testament is basically where we're coming from here. We want you then to use your knowledge and your abilities, and you'll be interpreting key Old Testament text. One of them will be a Psalms paper, which we'll talk more about. Okay, so we're Hybrid Plus course format, meaning that out of our 10 weeks, we have 9 weeks of online interaction and 1 week in the classroom. And I am so excited about this because we had a good time in the winter with a hybrid up in Seattle, even though we had a snow day. It was a really fun and I think a productive environment for discussing and learning. So we'll be having classroom instruction and classroom interaction. Okay, so required reading, you have a lot of pages of reading, which is very typical for Fuller. Each of our syllabi go through a vetting process by the department, and each of the syllabi are required to contain a certain number of things. And so in this case, it falls into line with that, but it does sound like a lot when you first get started. So we're having you read from Scripture, Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, 2 Samuel, etc., etc., etc. Please choose an NRSV, a TNIV, or a CEB version to use as your main version. Okay, we'll do some Bible comparison of translations, but you'll start with a base translation from one of those three. So be sure that you've got one or can access on Blue Letter Bible. We certainly don't have any problem getting texts these days with all the online stuff that's available. Two books that I wish that you will have on your shelf with you right now. One of them is Bernard Anderson's Out of the Depths. This is often available at Half Price Books and other places. At least we find copies around here quite often for a reduced price because students use it and then they turn it in. So check your Half Price Books, your Amazon if you need to, or whatever for that. Now, Michael Coogan, I believe I have put on here the second edition because that's the edition I have on my shelf, but people are coming up now with the third edition. So that 2008-2009 edition is also fine. You'll need to read according to topic rather than page numbers. Okay, so I've listed topics and page numbers in the reading list, but you'll need to, if you have that newer version, go ahead and look for topic because I think the pagination is off by some. So we may have to do some comparison and that kind of thing. The pages I believe I put in there are from the second edition. Okay, now the other books are available through the Fuller Library online. So you can have your choice. You can either buy them, get them used, borrow them from your own library, or go to the Fuller Library online. And this is a really nice, really good option that you can go ahead and look things up. So Adele Berlin's Introduction to Hebrew Poetry is in the New International Bible, Volume 4. And the way you get to the ebook is to go to Ministry Matters, and you hunt it down from there. Perhaps if you have any problems with that, let me know because it's a twofold search for that particular one. Once you find it, you're into this whole commentary set, and it's a really good one. So I'll look forward to you using that. We're also going to look at J. Clinton McCann's Psalms in the same group. Okay, so it's actually the same book. And Jean-Louis Sca's Introduction to Reading the Pentateuch. If you have a chance to purchase that, I'd put it on my shelf. It's really good. It's got all of the basic discussions that are pretty up to date about the documentary hypothesis and how scholars these days are looking at that, and other really good introductory material for Old Testament. Now, in the e-reserves, you have a list of different things here, and you can go into e-reserves. When I sort of put a brief reading list together, I'll oftentimes use the author's last name. So you might look up, for example, who's on here? Let's see here, Athalia Brenner, and look up Brenner in the list and you'll find it. I believe I also sorted that list at one point in time according to week. I'll go check and see if that's possible too, because that made it really handy. All the people had to do is go in and find week 1, pull the things up for that week and be reading them. There's a list of recommended reading, and I would also recommend almost anything by these authors as well, or the people that they come up with. So it's a really nice pool of resources there that you can go to and find some more things if you need to. Okay, assignment and assessments. This is something I want to talk about because what we're doing for our weekly forum posts here is a little different than what you would do if it's a 10-week class. So first of all, we're going to have class activities. I have some short video lectures, visual presentations. I love to put musical scores out there that go along with what we're working on, so sometimes you'll run across one. That kind of thing, and those will be right there in the first page of your weekly sections. Now the weekly forum posts are altogether worth 20% of your grade. Okay, but we're not going to do weekly forum posts every week. in this case because we're going to be together. So a couple of times you'll do a weekly forum post and chat with each other online and do it as we normally would for an online class. The other ones are you're going to bring your materials with you to class, and we'll be doing some classroom discussion, and that will go basically into this category. So when I assign to you a topical question, please take some notes from your reading and write a few things up so you're prepared to talk in class and prepared to hand those things in. And I'll talk more about that later. Okay, number 4 is the required reading. And number 5 is a discussion of 2 projects you'll do. One of them is what I like to actually call an event line. And one of them is a choice. You can either do a movie review and reflection or a creative expression that has to do with your the psalm that you're going to make. I found in the winter term people really liked that creative expression, and a lot of people got it done and brought it to class, and we did presentations in class of the creative expression related to the chosen psalm, and it was really, really rich. So excuse me, you might want to think along those lines. For people who are not maybe so interested in performing or getting up in front of the class, the essay project is pretty good. Now, the interpretive essay that examines the Old Testament text is your long paper, also known as an exegetical paper. However, we're not working with a full load of exegetical materials here, so we've kind of brought that down into something called an interpretive essay. So what we want to do is to learn how to take the materials we're teaching you about interpretation and then actually practice that on a given text. Okay, assignment page here, you've got assignments that are due the week that they are presented. So your first paper project will be due week 2. That's choosing a psalm, writing it up according to the instructions. Actually, I need to post you some more information about that. I've just discovered that they did save something from Moodle that I have written up that has everything to do with preparing this assignment. So I'm going to round that up and post it for you. But the first assignment that you will do is to pick a psalm from a list and write up some observations about that. And then the forum topics are listed in the next section. Forums worth 40%. So those go by week. Next week we'll talk Psalms, the week after that Genesis, and so forth. Okay. One thing I want you to look at is the week 6 has a red line project here. Okay, so that one is the week that we do 2 Samuel is when your project is actually going to be prepared. Look down at the end, it's due by Friday of week 8. Okay, so if you want to get your stuff ready for week 6 to present in class, that's great. You can look ahead and work on the creative expression and have it ready for when we do it in class. However, according to our syllabus, it's not due until week number 8. So that one, it's summertime, you might feel like enthusiastic and creative, or you might feel like putting your feet up. So whatever, I'm willing to take it in at week 6, but the final time to hand that in is week 8. Okay, you may come up with more questions about the assignment list, so go ahead and let me know by email and I'll pass it on, or use the course question forum for that. The Intro to Old Testament Reading assignments are the next page. You have a week and a topic, and then listed out for you Coogan, the main textbook we have, what we're reading this week in Scripture, and then what is on the plate for e-reserves. And so you just go across there and pick from each of those and do the reading. And again, with Coogan, we may need to have you look by topic. I'm going to check into that because I think actually a student had given me a list, but I've also given you the chapter numbers there. So, and there you go, all the way through. Okay, finally there's a grading rubric at the end that gives you some basic information. I always like to think I'll make a more detailed one for the final paper, and usually we go back and refer to this particular one. So, good, alrighty, so I'm hoping that this gives you a lot of information to work with. I'm really looking forward to meeting up with you in Pasadena and getting to know you a little bit better. And so we will talk to you very soon. Be sure to get to me on the question forum or by email if you have any questions at all. Okay, have a great day. Bye-bye.